Samavakar, dim. And then there was one form which was called Utsrishtakanka, which showed the aftermath of a great war. And you all know what is the aftermath of a great war. Horrible misery, wailing children, wailing women, dead bodies lying all over. That was to present the pathos, the karuna of the destruction. Remember we said in the morning, Raudracha Karuno Rasaha, because it was such a horrible event. Therefore, that was the Utsrishtakank. Now these are all plays which represent conflict. Unfortunately, what has happened is, lots of stereotypes have developed about classical Indian theatre. I'll talk about this when I come to the 17th chapter. It's called Sanskrit theatre. With 20% of Sanskrit, it's still called Sanskrit theatre. One stereotype. Another stereotype, there is no conflict in ancient Indian theatre. It exists only in Greek theatre. Indian theatre is about forgiveness and coming together. What has happened is people have studied only Natak because they are high literary products. Kalidas, 3 plays of Kalidas, and then other than Kalidas, some plays which are romantic plays and which end in a union, happy ending. So people have developed this kind of a stereotype. But that is not true. The majority of ancient Indian performances were full of fights. They were full of conflicts. And hence, these stages were required. Now to your question. When would they make a big stage? As and when they wanted to perform these plays. And wherever they wanted to perform these plays, then they would make a big stage. I was trying to explain to you that a stage is made according to the kind of play you make. It had nothing to do with region, because the Natya Shastra tells us that there was an all India theatre. There is so much of it, so much proof of it, that it was not a regional theatre. There are people who think that it was a regional theatre, it was a northern theatre, but that's not true. Because there is so much, as we'll go along, you will find sufficient proof of it in different principles, aspects and applications. So they would make it at all kinds of places. Yes, we don't have historical records of it. But then historical records in other cultures also are missing. I don't know why we should feel so guilty. We have historical records from ancient Greece only for 70 years, and out of the 490 or so plays referred to in classical texts, only 60 or 70 survive. So this process has been pretty much universal. A few things survive in history, most things don't. What we are lucky is that we have this huge 6,000 verses text surviving. And it presents a unified picture of what was going on for a long time. Yes, next question, please.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
If we say that theatres are to be constructed for public performances, just for the sake of performance, that particular presentation, we create the space. By the end of it, we destroy the mandap. In that case, when did the tradition of construction of a permanent Kootambalam or a theatre space started in the history of Indian theatre?
Well, as I said, that the permanent stage begins with the temple.
Okay.
And as I referred, that creating a Nritya Mandap in the temple is largely a development of Nagar Shaili. And because Nagar Shaili begins earlier, 3rd century, 2nd century AD, that's the evidence we have. And then when we come down to the 7th and 8th century, then all over India we have this by that time. All the 10 different kinds of temple architect genres, they all developed the Nritya Mandap. So it seems that right from 2nd or 3rd century, when they started making the big temple complexes, they made the stage for the dancer. But remember, this is for the temple dance. Yes. It's not for performing Abhigyan Shakuntalam. It was not for performing Swapnavasav Dattam or Madhyam Vyayog or Tripurdaha or something. What was called proper theatre, that was still done outside, and that was done by making a temporary, because that was not done in the temple. Yes, they could be done as attached to a temple festival, but then that would be outside or in one of the big prakaras of the temple. I mean, that's something one can understand. Okay. So the two things have to be seen. One, the Devadasi tradition, which develops very early. You have sufficient evidence of it from 4th, 5th century. And that was not just the dancer, but the musician, the Vidwan, because these temples were like temple cities. They were full of wealth. They were so attractive to the plunderers. And there, the kind of theatre you had was not the theatre about which we are talking. It is not the theatre of immense variety. It is more like what is surviving today. Although even the dance form that survives today had a much greater variety, obviously, because that is described and because it must have been in interaction to the bigger art form, the art form of theatre. People would be moving from one to another. There was a massive investment in performing arts in India, a very, very big investment, unparalleled in human history. And because the values were different. And it was the earning member of the society, the grihastha, who was paying for it all. It was not the king who was paying for it. It was the grihastha who was paying for all these different things. And it's entirely different from the concept that we have today. The money makers don't want to pay for anything. They don't want to patronize the universities or the places of worship. You know. Yeah. So it's a very different ethics that operated.
Okay.
I would like you to comment on two things that I noticed. The Natya Shastra was created for the purpose of enjoyment for all, whereas the complex ritualistic processes reflect the caste system very prominently.
Where in the Natshas?
Yes, as in, I mean, while I was reading it a few days back, when they talk about the ritualistic processes, as in the Brahmins and the Kshatriyas and they would all give different offerings while during the construction of the stage. So I'm not very sure.
Yes.
Yeah. So don't they reflect the caste system very prominently, and whereas it was created for the purpose of enjoyment for all. This is one thing that I noticed. And secondly, I would like you to comment on, would you call it dynamic, as it does not incorporate technology, for example?
It does not incorporate technology. Well, I can answer your first question very quickly. It used all the technology which was available or developed at that time. The technology of construction of a building, and using different aspects of architecture for the creation of the theatre house, that it would have gavakshas and window system and staircases. So whatever was available in the science of architecture was used in the construction of theatre, except that this theatre was made out of wood and perishable material. Now to the second question. Look, you have to get a realistic picture of ancient India or medieval India or pre-modern India. It was a hierarchical society, like society in Greece or society in Europe. All over the world we had heavily hierarchical society. Aristotle had his slaves, Plato had his slaves. He was talking of freedom, he was talking of all the best things that we like to read today, but it was a hierarchical society. So, Indian society was also a hierarchical society with different aspects and different so-called varanas. But they all wanted to enjoy theatre. This is a text which is Sarva Varanikam. In the morning, we spent a lot of time in trying to explain how the exclusive Vedic knowledge or the fruit of the Vedic knowledge, the principles, the ideas, they were to be dissipated among the people. And I also elaborated that Vedic does not mean contained just in the Vedic Samhita, but in the Vedic tradition. So which would include the Aranyakas, the Brahmanas, the Puranas, the Smritis and all that. So it was a hierarchical society, and in any hierarchical society when people do anything, then they do it according to their time and place. It happens in 26 January also. You know, the foot soldiers are marching in one place and the generals are elsewhere and the President of India. But everybody did participate according to what was prescribed for them. This is important. Including the Shudras, the working class, including the moneyed class, the Vaishya, and then the Kshatriyas. And these are ritual places. Money would be coming, funding would be coming from the whole, the city as a whole. It's pretty much the situation for the education. To a, let us say, a agrahara or to an ashram where you went for some kind of a higher education, which would be, let us say, in a small city, and all of them were outside the cities, most of them. It is the people around who would be contributing. Sometimes the king would come and give a grant. Like people from Chennai have to run to New Delhi to get a UGC grant for Annamalai University or any such thing. It comes sometimes, it doesn't come. So similarly, sometimes the king comes, he gives a lot of money, goes back. But it's the ordinary people who are giving its daily sustenance. And they would be giving it according to the prescribed customs. But then if I go on this, it becomes a lecture on Indian sociology, and the digression becomes too much. But try to understand that this was, for your purpose here, or for the purpose of Natyashastra, what is important is a cooperative effort. It's not a commercial effort.
May I ask you for the division what you showed about or described about the stage?
The stage.
Yeah, you said that it's divided into two halves. The front half is divided further. Just as a repetition.
The Madhyama Vikrishta, there are a couple lines here which says that it is 1.5 hasta, the Ranga Shirsh and the Ranga Peeth have a difference of 1.5 feet. So it seems that the back portion, which was called the Ranga Shirsha, that would be 1.5 feet, approximately 3 feet higher. But this can happen only when the stage is big. If the stage is small, 32 feet total, sitting area included, then you can't have this difference, and it's not prescribed there.
Sorry, I'm just, you were explaining about the square, the entire theatre being, a space being divided into two halves. The
Yes,
front half.
only in the case of the rectangular theatre of the larger and the middle kind.
Okay.
Because each of these theatres had 3 sizes, Uttam, Madhyam and
yeah.
Kanishtha. As I said, this is according to the needs of the place, of the time. And most of these are prescriptions. Don't think that they were followed, with exactitude. We tend to get the impression that they were done exactly as it is written. It's not so, because the text itself provides you a lot of leeway. For instance, it is said that the theatre house should face the east. But it is also said, if east is not available, then you let it face wherever it is convenient and consider that to be east. You have to live. You have to adjust. So, a large number of prescriptions here are for the sake of starting things, and they can be followed only up to a degree. Which does not mean that it's laissez-faire or you do whatever you like. But somehow these adjustments would have to be made. That is why so much variety, in order to provide for different kinds of opportunities.
Sir, you had said theatre was a community event and it was not done so often. And communities came together to celebrate the festival through Natya. Now, is there a mention as to who initiates or finds the need for a Natya festival to come up? Is it something like a king initiates or a high priest initiates, or is it done based on a situation like after a victory of a war, or during, like the temple proceedings are happening? Is there any particular time when this Natya is kind of initiated?
Yes, there are so many descriptions, and there you find a lot of references, historical references, and it was done in all these occasions. As I said, in the Greek case, it was only 2 or 3 festivals fixed in the year, because that theatre was far more ritualistic and far more religion-oriented. Whereas in India, there were too many occasions. As I said, there was such a lot of investment in the arts. You yourself asked me in the question, was it done this? Yes, so many of them.
So you had shared how before a performance, the entire community is involved. The means becomes as important as the end, and the purpose of the play being highlighted. But cutting to today, none of that is in focus when we approach a performance.
Nothing?
Would it?
Nothing? Please repeat, nothing? I couldn't...
Oh, today, yeah, okay.
No, your question.
My question is, from what I just heard, I understood that the means of approaching a play, the performance, before going to the performance, the entire process of the people being involved and beautifully experiencing the means as important as the end.
Yes.
Everything was in focus. The purpose of the play was highlighted, and the purpose was kept in mind, and accordingly everything was done. when we approach a performance today, I'm not very sure if these things are in focus. Priority becomes something else. I probably come back remembering the color of the costume more. But my question is, and also going back to a reference in the morning session where you had said art should be much more than art for art's sake. It has to elevate you, liberate you.
Did I say?
Art for art's sake. I thought I understood as it should not end at art for art's sake. It
Yes,
should
it should
further
not be for art
end
for
at,
art's
right,
sake.
right.
This is what I said.
Yeah, I came across an article which clearly said, segregate in your mind art for art's sake and art for social purpose, so that it helps you. That's precisely my question actually. Would it help keeping in mind before watching a performance, art for art's sake and art for social purpose, and tick one of them before you go to watch a performance, before it messes up your mind?
Look, in the morning, we made it clear that through the story in the first chapter itself, that it was for knowledge. That's why it's called the fifth Veda. That's the paradigm, the story given to it. And then it says that it is not just for entertainment or kridaniyakam or play, but knowledge for the benefit of all. And the term used there is sarvavaranikam. That is to all sections of society, all varnas, all castes as we translate. What I said was, it should not be equated with art for art's sake. It is for the benefit, education as well. It is pleasure, but unless it has a social purpose, unless it promotes harmony, understanding between the people, in the broad sense of being in the Vedic tradition, it is insufficient. This is what I said. So this concept of art for art's sake is very alien to the Indian system. Well, now I've got used to it. It is, if they think it's necessary for video recording. Yes, it is warm and that can be just. Yes, next question please. Yes, definitely. You have a question? Oh, I thought you had got up to ask for a question. Anyway, when he comes back, we'll take up the question. Now, I go essentially to the idea in the third chapter, there is a big description of certain dance forms which are to be employed in theatre. In the morning, somebody asked me that apart from the fact that the Vedic text, the Patya, follows the tradition of Rig Veda, and I said yes, what it means is that the process of preserving the text and then employing it in Natya, this is the real meaning. Apart from these things and the other three things which we described, was there something in the Vedic period, in the Vedic sacrifice, which got again transferred to Natya? And towards the end of this chapter, what you find here is that there is a large number of dances. Now these dances were done with certain songs. Because the Vedic sacrifice was not just this yajna, but there were all kinds of other entertainments and things which were part of it. Like music. Not Vedic music, but even Gandharva or non-Vedic music. Similarly, there were dances, different kind of gitis, which were performed, and then they became part of the dance performances in plays. Now, how would this happen? Where would this happen? This would happen very much in two places. One in Purvarang. Tomorrow we shall begin with Purvarang, and I shall explain to you what was Purvarang, why was Purvarang done. You see, a classical performance of a single play was not 3 hours. It was perhaps not even 3 days. It could be as long as 6 days or 7 days. And how could that go on? Because people very often ask the actor to perform something else, to repeat, or to create something on his or her own. Part of that tradition is still living, what is called the Manodharma in Kudiyattam, where you do a creation which is not part of the written text, but something which you start doing there and then. But it was all part of the performance that it will be interspersed with different kinds of songs and dances. When we come to the 32nd chapter, then we will find what is called dhruvas. There was a technique in ancient plays which was called dhruvagan. You know, the idea of dhruvagan was simply this, that before a character enters on the stage, there would be a song which would be sung and which would be called Praveshiki Dhruva. Right? And somebody would sing that song, and an actress or a dancer would dance that song. So, before the actual entrance, there would be that song. Now that takes time. And if the audience like it very much and ask for a repeat, then it takes more time. So that's how the play goes on and on. The modern audience simply cannot watch it. The modern audience looks for a fast forward. You see, I don't want to see this song sequence, and I go for a fast forward if I want action. But the ancient audience did not want a fast forward. The ancient audience, whenever they like something, then they would say once more, a rewind. And this is something which I have seen just 20, 30 years ago. If they appreciate it, they say, okay, perform again. And then the performer would perform again, but with a difference. Not the same thing again. So, this room for creativity, and all this was done in order to create the bhava.